that endangers water, air quality, and just the general, the environment in general, and which also encompasses animal life, plant life, because we certainly believe that those things have a voice. And why don't you look at your neighbor and say, don't you know that the animals need to have a voice? Yeah. No, we're in the church now. Two things to do. Turn to your neighbor and say, do you not realize that the animals need a voice?
Yes, sir, they need a voice.
Do you not realize that rivers and creeks and streams need a voice?
Yes.
There you go, you come along with me. Do you not realize that trees and plants need a voice?
Yes.
I think I might be preaching a few minutes. Okay. So we are that voice. Corporations have a voice. But those things that I've aforementioned, or that I've mentioned, they don't really have a voice. And so we're that voice. And I'm just saying all of this so I can shut up, all right? And so, and we need to continue to be that voice. And yes, we do need infrastructure. We need all of those things for all of the reasons that can be enumerated. But people are more important. And we're not about the money. And money has its use, but no one has the right or the authority to threaten or to put in harm's way or danger air, water, life. And anything that goes against those things is nothing more than an injustice. Okay? And I can put all kinds of adjectives in front of the word injustice, and it would be qualified. Okay, and to meet that standard. So we want to thank those of you who have come out, and I need to turn this microphone over. Who am I turning this over to?
Laura.
Who?
Laura, man.
What? Jesus, that we come, we greet you, we praise you, we thank you. We thank you, Father God, because we have different beliefs, but we're on one accord. We ask that you continue to guide us and direct us, keep us a sound mind, not to let greed and avarice and all of those things blind us, but Father God, that we might be about your business. We thank you for the information that's going to come forth. Might we strategize and do the things that we need to do, that we can continually prepare ourselves. We ask this in the precious name of Jesus. Amen.
I know a lot of us know each other. And I'm really happy to see all these familiar and unfamiliar faces. Just real quick as an intro, I always just like to open the floor and give the chance for everyone to speak to who they are and why they're here. So I'm actually going to pass the mic around just to start, and we'll just work our way down the rows, and you can just say your name and where you're from. Oh, but before that, we have a super quick local PSA from Heidi.
Hey, about probably more than half an hour ago now, there was a man who was desperately looking for someone whose water pipe in their basement broke, and he couldn't find this person. It was a woman, and so I just wondered, I was trying to help him. He's a plumber, his name's Carl Dickerson, and
Billy Davies, and I am from Richmond, Virginia.
My name's Zach McConnell, and I'm from Pittsburgh, North Carolina.
Hello, I'm Jeff Curry, and I'm a member of the local community.
Hello, I'm Jiva Abate. I represent Yogaville Environmental Solutions from Yogaville.
Hi, my name's Alexis Sepsi. I'm from Richmond, Virginia.
I'm Nat. I'm from Richmond, Virginia.
My name is Harold Wood. I'm from Buckingham.
My name is Marie Gillespie, and I'm the first house on the road.
I'm Swami Dayananda from Satchidananda Ashram, Yogaville, Buckingham, Virginia.
I'm Swami Guru Javanananda Mataji from Yogaville in Buckingham. JD and
With our resistance, we are upon the air permit, which is the last big permit. There may be some little ones down the road that Dominion needs. And there is a comment period that will start on the 4th? The 8th, I'm sorry, the 8th. And that'll run for 30 days, at the end of which, on September 11th, there will be a public hearing. So we're here to try to get you guys to show up in whatever way you can, to make comments, even if you don't really encourage comments, really encourage them, and we're going to give you some information to go on. But show up and support us, because we have to live with this if this happens, and we don't want to live with this. Who wants to live with this? No. Yeah. So, please, that's about all I have to say about it, is that, we have an air permit to deal with, and we're going to do a really good job.
Yeah, thank you, Dad. Yeah, so just to add to that, I know so many people have been a part of resisting the ACP and the NDP for the last 4 years, and resisting the compressor station for the last 4 years too. And folks have been there at every step of the way, opposing the compressor station, and this is a really, really important permit. And we're going to talk about the process for the approval or denial of that permit, and also sort of what it looks like and what we need to speak to on it. But first I just want to say thank you so much to everyone who's here from very nearby and very far away. Really appreciate everyone in the space. And just so you know, I am not an expert about air permits. This is the first one that I've really looked at. But I am here to help facilitate the conversation. So if there's ever a time where you have an answer to something that I don't know, please don't hesitate to raise a hand, and we'll pass you the mic and you can share that info. Really, my reason for being here is just to help facilitate the conversation and make sure that we can finish at a good time so we can all have a potluck together at 6:30. Because we all know that food and nourishment is super important to any work that we do. So just really quick, I just want to mention for the agenda, we've kind of gone through the introduction, but as I said, we're going to talk about the process for the air permit, what is in this 30 to 35 days of the comment period, why it's important, how to engage on that, and then of course the finer points of how to comment. And also I just want to mention there is a sign-in sheet that's working its way, it's on a clipboard. We're going to work its way through the rows. Please, please, please sign in. We want to make sure to stay in touch with you specifically because we don't have all the details about the permit right now, but we're going to have a lot more information about the specifics about that permit, talking points, etc., for you to use to comment soon. So it's really important that we're able to stay in touch with you and get you that information.
Yes. I just wanted to...
Yeah.
Please feel free to record or film. Okay. Thank you.
Great.
Forgive me my sunglasses. I forgot my regular glasses. I'm not trying to be sorry. Jackie, you?
So really quick, just go over next steps, and we're definitely here to get feedback in terms of what you think best practice should be for getting outreach to get more people to the hearing and commenting, because this is hugely important to this community, to stopping the compressor station and the pipeline in general. Do folks have any questions about what the next hour is going to look like? All right, super. In that case, I'll pass it off to Billy.
Thank you, Laura. Good evening again, everybody. Once again, my name is Billy Davies. I am the Pipelines Community Outreach Coordinator for the Sierra Clubs chapter here in Virginia. I want to thank you all again for your time. As Laura mentioned, I'm just going to go quickly go over the process that we are now engaged in and how we can utilize our power. So first, just so I can just reiterate once, you all have power. You all are powerful. And so what we're hoping that you'll see in this process, as we're in the details that we're about to share with you, is we're going to discuss how we can together effectively utilize that power to make change for the better in our community, and then at the end, talk about next steps about how we can bring more people in so that they can share their power with us, so that we can continue to build a stronger community. So I thank you all for coming out here tonight. So first, I'll just explain briefly the details about the process we're about to participate in. We're about to participate in a Department of Environmental Quality public comment period of 30 days. It will officially start this Wednesday, August 8th, and will run until September 11th, Tuesday, September 11th. This is a mandatory part of the process under federal law that the government must go through to allow sufficient comment from the public, those affected by these types of projects, fracked gas pipelines, to ensure that they are in compliance with the federal law and essentially not making grave mistakes, and so that they'll share their plans with us as they've done, give us the opportunity to expose the flaws in the permitting process, and then effectively respond to comments from the public. So, just a couple important dates coming up. One very soon. One on August 16th at the Buckingham County Administration Building, 6 p.m. Department of Environmental Quality will be giving a presentation about the draft permit, which they posted up online, and we have ample copies here for you tonight for you to review. They will talk about their perspective on the draft permit, why they think they've complied with the law, and they will also be able to answer any questions that we have. Essentially, this will be an opportunity for us and our allies in and around inside Buckingham and outside Buckingham to make sure that DEQ, the government, is fulfilling its obligation to the community and to the state under state and federal law. We will have allies from far and wide, so we expect it to be a very well-attended event. We'll have those that have expertise in these types of construction process in frac gas pipelines, the construction of compressor stations, and they will be there to go to bat for us. They know what questions to ask, this nitty-gritty questions that are very technical about the details that will expose some of the holes that unfortunately DEQ has been overlooking for this past year. But it'll also be an opportunity for any member of the community or any member of the Commonwealth to come and ask questions. And so we encourage you all to attend, and we will discuss in a moment how we can ensure that that is well attended. After this, we will continue the public comment process. And we'll get into a little bit more about the details about how exactly we all can participate in the comment process, whether by attending the hearing or submitting written comments. But after this Q&A session hosted by DEQ, we all have the opportunity to give our input, share our voice with the government on the issues related to this permit that would allow Dominion to build this frac gas compressor station. The final hearing, which will conclude the public comment process, as I mentioned, will take place as Laura mentioned, will take place on September 11th. That will also be here in Buckingham County, the Buckingham County Middle School, in the evening. And that they will allow it for those who have already submitted written comments, or whether you've submitted written comments or have not, you'll have the opportunity you have 3 minutes to provide your own comments, to share your story with the government and explain to DEQ why they are ill-advised they would be ill-advised in allowing this compressor station to be built. Once the comment process concludes, the Department of Environmental Quality will review all comments. Each and every comment submitted, no matter how long or how short, will be reviewed by the Department of Environmental Quality, and they will make a response. This will be compiled together in a final decision, which will either be granting a final permit or explaining why they will not be issuing the permit. That will be about 30 days after this public comment period closes. And I know I just threw a lot of information. I'm about to go into, I'd like to explain why you should comment on how you might go about doing that, but I know I threw a lot of details. Does anybody have any questions now?
Do you know anything about the details for the August 16 meeting? You get 3 minutes, you have to sign it in advance.
16 is just like...
You can't comment on the...
Non-comment section.
Oh, it's just listening?
Just,
to-
well, you can ask
Yeah.
questions. You can ask
Okay.
questions, but it's not a hearing,
Yeah.
so you can't comment, but you can
Thank
ask
you.
questions about the permit and the process.
So, yeah, so just as Laura mentioned, so we will not have the opportunity to give comments on this August 16th meeting, but the questions that we ask are very important. As all questions that we ask, DEQ must submit a response, whether it's right there at the meeting or in writing afterwards. They must respond to any and all questions that we have. So we will encourage any and all questions to be submitted.
I went to all 5 DEQ hearings in local places last summer for the water certificate, and you had to get there early to sign up to speak. And this meeting is being conveyed as having it'll either end at a certain time or when the questions are finished. So they're not going to go over, they're not going to stay as long enough to hear every public comment. So getting there early is really important. What we found last summer was that no matter how early we got there were often 10 or 15 people signed up mysteriously in advance in support of the pipeline before we got there hours ahead. So coming early is important, and some of us will be there to do a prayer and song circle an hour before the meeting starts if you want to come for that.
Yes, there's probably a way to sign in online.
No.
No?
And so as far as I know, I know we're bouncing around to the different dates. The 16th is the one coming up the soonest, and that's just the briefing where you can ask questions. Kay was referring to the hearing on the 11th of September. And so far, I did call DEQ and got to talk to Ann Wren, and as far as she knows thus far, the comment period, the public hearing, which is September 11th, is much like any other. You get there in person to sign up. It's best to get there as early as possible. You write your name down, and then they'll just call your name when it's time for you to comment, and everyone gets 3 minutes tops. According to them, it's so as many people have the time to speak as possible, or as many people can talk as want to. And I did just want to add really, really quickly, in terms of the decision-making process for this air permit, like we were saying, the comment period goes until the 11th of September, which is also when the hearing is going to be in Buckingham. DEQ receives all those comments and reviews them, and likely will respond to a number of them as well. They come up with a summary, and they're going to present that summary and a recommendation to the Air Board. And the Air Board is a citizen board, much like the Water Control Board that a lot of us are familiar with. And it's actually the Air Board that will decide whether this permit is accepted or denied, or they want more things added to it. And just something to flag about that Air Board meeting, we don't know when that will be yet, but the DEQ needs the time to review these comments. And so it's likely that the Air Board will meet in November before the holiday. That's about as much as we know so far. And all of this information that we're reviewing is up on the DEQ website, and it's also making its way in the how-to comment worksheet that's working its way around. And so these are also the things that we'll likely be updating you on as well. Sharon?
I believe that the Air Board meeting will be much like the State Water Control Board meetings were, where there will be opportunity for public input there. When they did the State Water Control Board meetings for the 401 certification, when they came into the communities, we all got to speak then. And then when they had the State Water Control Board meetings last December, everybody got to speak again then. So just think about that and remember that you'll have a couple of opportunities to speak. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't come on September 11th, because you should. It's really important to have as many people there commenting as possible.
Where is that held and what time?
September 11th? The 16th, so sorry. So August 16th, there's actually a little handout, a little quarter sheet that's making its way around Buckingham County Administration Building in the evening, yeah. And we'll make sure to, at the very end, run through each of the dates, the time, and the where. Mindy?
It's my understanding that comments need to be limited to the air permit itself.
That's right.
And not to health and safety issues or any other issues that we might have about the compressor station.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about how to comment, and so far what we know about the draft permit thus far. Mindy was bringing up a good point of the comments on the permit have to be limited to what is in the permit. And we're technically not supposed to bring up other concerns like safety, public safety, or noise. In my humble opinion, I think it's important, especially at the hearings, to just say whatever is most important to you. That is the opportunity for DEQ to hear straight from you, the people who they're supposed to be working for. It's the opportunity, for the air board to hear straight from you, and that influences their decision, even though they're just supposed to be going over this technical air permit. And so Billy was saying, and we can talk more about this, but it's extremely important for you to share your story. You're the expert, ultimately, of what's best for your community. Did you have more that you wanted to add to that? And I think we might have a couple more questions. Okay. Did you have more to add to that?
No, that's okay. I think they're pretty much with mixture. You have to be there in person to sign up.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
They haven't changed anything. You can't do anything online, correct?
Correct.
Mr. White has a question.
Well, the members of the Board of Supervisors, we asked to come. They should be there.
Yeah, we should definitely. Did everybody hear that? Yeah. Yeah, we should definitely be asking the Board of Supervisors, Buckingham Board of Supervisors, to be present. They made some decisions about the compressor station, and they should be seeing this the whole process through.
But for the meeting of September the 11th, to sign up to speak, will they take sign-ups after 5 o'clock, or do we have to be there at 4 to make sure?
Yeah. So this was discussed a little bit. We encourage everyone to get there as early as possible, just because we know this is an important issue that a lot of people will be rallying around. They will continue to take sign-ups after 5, as far as we know. People can continue to come in and sign up, but at 9:30, that's when the hearing will end, whether everyone got to speak or not. So if you want to speak, we definitely encourage you to get there early to sign up on the 11th.
This is at the BOS here in the county?
Well, at the very end, we're going to run through the where and the when one more time. And it's also on a lot of the documents that we're handing out.
And thank you for your question. And I'm just going to add quickly, Laura hit the nail on the head. You are the experts of your own story. You don't need to be, the important thing to convey to neighbors who might be interested in submitting a comment or participating in this process, and how you can realize your own power in this process, is just remembering that you are the expert of your own story. You don't need to be a technical expert. You don't need to have all the details in this mess of a draft permit. But your participation will be important. And these events, like the August 16th hearing, Q&A session, and some of the materials that we are passing around and will be sending your way after this meeting, they can help guide you as you are thinking about your story and thinking about what you might want to say to DEQ or to the Air Board. But important is to convey is what this means to you, what this travesty of a project means to you and your community, how you will be affected. And you're welcome to incorporate as much or as little of some of the materials that we'll be sending your way. Hopefully, we expect at the end of this Q&A session that a lot more will come to light about this draft permit, so that it'll make commenting much easier. But just something to keep in mind. Remember, you are the expert in your own story. Your story is valuable. That's what this whole process is about, is sharing your story with the government, making sure that you are heard and you are considered. And with that, Laura is going to talk a little bit now about some of the specific topics that we'll be focusing on in general as a community, some of the different parts of the permit that we'll be focusing on, the comments that you'll have the opportunity to highlight in your comments.
So y'all, I'll just mention, oh yeah, we got one more. Let me go ahead and do the mic.
You know, when Mr. White spoke about Environmental Board of Supervisors, I also wondered, does anyone know anywhere on positions for social responsibility? That's another one that would be really great to get.
Yeah, so just like Physicians for Social Responsibility, they're a really phenomenal organization that works specifically on health issues. And they've been here before, and they're in touch around supporting our work on digging through the air permit, and will likely be here again. So, y'all, I just wanted to mention that, so we have a few, unfortunately not a ton of copies of the draft permit here. It's 23 pages of very technical stuff, but I just wanted to offer for anyone who definitely likes to look at an actual printed copy of a thing and not a screen. That's me. I want to make sure to pass a few of these copies around. In future meetings, and likely at the DEQ briefing, there will be additional paper copies. This is something that they really should have on hand. I only have about 11 copies here, so I'm going to pass it around. Please only take one right now if you really feel like you want and need it, and if there's additional people that want some sooner rather than later, we can print out more copies and get them to you. Yes, I sure can. Change up the order of things.
And it's on the Friends of Buckingham website.
Yes, and it's on the Friends of Buckingham website, it's on the DEQ website, it'll very shortly be on the Appalachian Voices website, so we're going to make sure to have multiple places where you can access this information. Okay, so the draft permit is a minor source air permit. I don't know much about air permits, like I was saying, but I know that there's a minor source and a major source. Minor source release fewer pollutants, major source release more. Both are basically permits saying, if they're granted, that you're allowed to release so many pollutants into the air. It's legal. But we all know that just because something is legal doesn't mean that it's right. But this compressor station comes under the minor source air permit application. And really this draft permit, this 23 pages draft permit, really breaks down what those air emissions are likely going to be and how they're going to do their best to limit and mitigate those pollutants getting into the air. So really there's what we can respond to, and what we really ought to be digging into is what those pollutants are and how they impact our health. Yeah.
Who is putting who's printing out what are the pollutants and how dangerous are they?
Can you put that close to us?
Who is the one giving the information? Is that Dominion itself?
Yes.
Well, then there's a big question.
Yes, exactly.
Very good. So, excuse me, the draft permit, is written by DEQ, but it's all information that's provided by Dominion, which we all know how Dominion works, how Dominion greenwashes, how Dominion usually lies to get what they want and have a lot of money to back it. And so that's something that a lot of folks, as we know, are already very well aware of and know to be responding to. And I just want to open it up really quick because I know that Dominion was recently here and they were put on the spot in a number of ways. And they've already been saying a lot of things about how technologically advanced their compressor station is going to be, but that hasn't really been very affirming for all of us already anyway. So I just want to open the floor to what we know already about the permit and about the compressor station, and I'm going to try to limit this to 5 to 10 minutes. Jiva.
Essential, because we were here when Dominion sent some 8 or 9 people who were supposed to be experts, and I've never seen them more stumped. I don't know whether it was being in a church where they couldn't feel free to say what they like to say, but they were as nervous as I've ever seen those guys in a presentation. Now, important point was that we had heard from DEQ when they spoke to the Advisory Committee on Environmental Justice at Yovaville, that DEQ was testing a new process of protecting and cleaning the air and controlling the sound of the compressor station. Brand new system. Then when these folks were here, DEQ was in front of us, Dominion was in front of us, Chad asked them directly, are you testing a new system? Is this are we guinea pigs for a new system? And Dominion said, no, this system's been in place around and other, including Loudon and other compressor stations. So there's a problem. They're not speaking on the same wavelength. And second of all, as someone from the computer world, I know that their quoting specifications about how equipment performs is different than testing it live to see exactly how much is cleaning, how much is polluting. So right now we have some serious questions about this new technology, about how clean everything's going to be and so on.
Thanks, Eva. All right. And I'm running down the aisle.
A little bit about what it means to be a synthetic minor permit or minor permit and a major source permit. The uncontrolled emissions for the source are, as I recall, are greater than the uncontrolled emissions for the source. I believe are greater than the threshold for a major source. So they have to put in controls to get themselves down to where they're below the major source thresholds. Okay. They have controls. The controls are fairly standard technology controls. By the way, my background is I write permit applications, so I know something about what they're doing and understand some of the technologies involved here. There's two different classes of pollutants. There's criteria pollutants, which are CO, NOx, which are NO and NO2, VOCs, which are reactive volatile organic compounds that react with the air, and NOx that form ozone, which is a criteria pollutant, and SO2, lead, which doesn't really come to play here, and particulate emissions. And there's two different categories of particulate emissions that we're looking at. It's PM 2.5 and PM 10. PM emissions from natural gas combustion are fairly small. The other type of emissions are toxic air contaminants or hazardous air pollutants. And those are a list of toxic contaminants that could be more health impactful. And one of the concerns that I have in looking at the dispersion modeling that they did is it looks like they modeled things in terms of the annual emissions and didn't look at the peak hourly emissions. And some of those pollutants have chronic, acute effects, and they should be modeling it as a peak emissions. And that's particularly true with the PIG events. A PIG is when they send a device basically down the length of the pipeline, and it detects the thickness of the pipeline the whole way to make sure that it's not corroded. So when they have to do these PIG events, there's a fairly large amount of emissions, and one of the things that they've said in their modeling is that they only do PIG events during the day. But then somewhere else they said that it takes 4 days to do a PIG event. So something's inconsistent here. They can't do it for 4 days and only do it during the day. The reason that matters is because the pollutants disperse much less at nighttime than they do during the daytime, because the emissions tend to stay closer to the ground level. So that's why, that's a important question. I guess I'll hand it over to that. If anybody has any?
How much can we expect independent, credible independent person such as yourself? How much weight can we expect for you guys to have in the analysis of the air permit that board is going to do? I mean, are they really, are they sort of considering Dominion as Bible?
Well,
I mean, how much, when you refute it, when folk like you and, you're more technically expert about it than, of course, than I am, but how much weight will your explanation and other folks like you really have with DEQ?
Regulators aren't terrible people. They have to follow rules and precedents, just like the law. Okay?
Hold it up close again.
Okay, sorry. Regulators are not terrible people. They have to follow the regulations and the law and the precedents. This is really not that different than a lot of stuff that they'll see, and they should follow the same procedures. Another thing that I mentioned in the dispersion modeling is that it looked like they're taking background levels. You have to take the emissions from the source plus the background levels of pollutants to make sure that they don't exceed a national ambient air quality standards. It looks like that they're only taking the background levels from the closest available receptor that they have data for, which is 100 miles away. And I think that's a major concern because according to the regulations, they have to get 3 years of local data. And they've sort of skirted that requirement, as I read it.
So you're
there are
referring
some
to
technical stuff.
You're referring to a baseline.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and if I could just add to that really quick, and then Shannon, I'll pass on to you, and then unfortunately probably need to keep moving on. So we talked about how September 11th is super, super important in terms of the hearing, but that'll largely be DEQ staff and maybe one or a couple more Air Board members. But the Air Board is, an independent citizen volunteer board. And so it's also really important to speak directly to them when they have their meeting later on in the fall. Because DEQ, the way that they worked with the State Water Control Board and these other decisions around the 2 pipelines and the water quality standards and the permits for them, they've really limited how much communication we have ahead of time with those board members. And there's a lot of research and a lot of background information that needs to go into making these decisions, and they can't make a good decision just based off of what DEQ tells them. That's not what we've seen with the State Water Control Board. And so to whatever degree we can be getting this important information to them that's paramount. And so being able to speak for yourself and not assuming that DEQ has represented your comments well, it's best not to assume that. It's also a priority to get to that Air Board meeting where they're going to make that decision so you can speak directly to the Air Board, who are an independent decision-making body. But DEQ largely limits the amount of communication they have with other folks like us, concerned citizens. Sharon?
It's my understanding that the modeling is done on peak efficiency of the equipment. And this compressor station will not operate at peak efficiency because it won't be operating at 100% all the time. And that makes a difference in the amount of pollution that is actually emitted. So that's another area.
They actually modeled 3 different modes.
Excuse me?
I believe they modeled it included emissions in 3 different modes.
Okay.
But they still looked at it over the full year and a percentage of time they're running at each load value.
And it's really important, the point about them doing it on the annual emission standards, because peak is very important and it makes a difference in what's happening in the local community. And the other thing I just want to say is, because I just saw the sign-up sheet and I signed my name, and then I saw under the will you speak at the meeting, a lot of people putting down if needed. You're needed.
Yeah.
So don't put down if needed. You are needed, and there are lots of people who will help. If you don't feel comfortable writing comments, there are a lot of people who will help do that. So please don't just change your if needed to yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. And I'll just add to that, so that this draft permit was only made available to the public a few days ago, right? So now we're all scouring to see what in the world it means, and what are the important takeaways. And so that information is still being developed right now. But we're likely going to have comment writing parties in the coming month, so folks can all work together to develop their comments, share information, because that's super, super important. So if needed, your comment is definitely needed, just to reiterate what Sharon said, and we'll have a lot more opportunities to share more information about what is in this permit and what we can respond to. I'll just add a couple other things really quick about the draft air permit. Some of the things to keep in mind is health impacts. You know, a lot of these air pollutants really impact people's health. And so in terms of writing your own story and helping Air Board understand where you're coming from, if you're comfortable, you should be talking about your health. How does the current air quality already impact it? How are you worried about it might impact it, how it might impact it with these additional air pollutants in the air? Some of the other things are sound impacts. We know that, you know, technically this is just on air and not about noise, but this is your story, these are your concerns. If you have concerns about that, you should be expressing them too. And just so you know, I'm adding ideas of questions we want to ask on the 16th or other things that we want to be commenting on to that list of ideas up there. If you have more, I have a giant roll of paper and we can just keep adding to the list. Billy, would you mind actually adding more paper? So really quickly, knowing that we're going to have a lot more information about the draft air permit in the coming weeks, given that we have 35 days to gather all this together, well, less than 35, but we have a few more yet. I also wanted to just make sure to quickly mention how to comment. And like I said, DEQ has all this information. They're likely going to cover it all again at the briefing that they're going to give on August 16th. But just so we've got all the bases covered, you can comment in person at the hearing, or you can deliver a written comment, and you can deliver that by hand, walking into the DEQ's office in Richmond. You can send it in by snail mail, or what I call snail mail, or you can email it or fax it. And all of that is in the how to comment handout sheet that was passed around to you on the DEQ website. It's going to be on the Friends of Buckingham website, Appalachian Voices, and a whole bunch of others. So just to reiterate, that information is out there. In terms of what to include, you want to make sure to say the name of the project, the number that DEQ is giving it in terms of that permitting process, which is in the document, and you want to make sure to include your name, your phone number, and your physical address. All those are requirements for handing in written comments. In terms of spoken comment, as we said, if you go to the hearing on the 11th, you get 3 minutes, and they'll likely ask you to give your name and your address, just as a reminder. Okay, so we are actually rolling right along. Do any folks have any additional questions or comments to share? We've got a couple.
Anyone who lives on the planet can comment. You don't have to live in Buckingham or Virginia.
Minor permit, it's got to be under 250 tons a year, and this adds up in those chemicals that that gentleman was speaking about. It's 221 tons a year, and CO2 is another 225 or something that's not figured into that 200.
Each pollutant aspect is counted separately.
Yes.
It's very hard to say much in 3 minutes. Time flies. So I would encourage people to write their comments and then hit 1 or 2 points hard. And allow, if you finish early, that's more time for others to chime in.
My point is that we've heard different comments from Dominion about how many blowdowns, which are big bursts of compressed volatile organic compounds and methane that are emitted from these stations periodically. Officially, Dominion has said they're going to have 1 official blowdown a year to test. Then I heard they were going to have 5 official blowdowns. And then I read an article about Loudoun County where they had 3 in a month because they needed to test for specific things. So evidently Dominion isn't restricted by how many blowdowns they can have, which emit tons of volatile toxic compounds into the air. So we need to pin this down. It is a moving target, and it's very important to the health of this community.
Yeah, the key there will be what is in the permit. Because they can't exceed whatever it is that's in the permit. The permit says it's wide open, then our comment should be that, now hold it, the modeling says this is what they did, we need to make sure that that gets put into the permit.
Right. Is your understanding that if there's an emergency detected by the sensors, that the compressor station can itself emit a blowdown for adjustment?
It will send an alarm, and the operator could have the capability of initiating a blowdown.
That's what I understand. I asked them at the Loudoun compressor station, you have some beautiful sensors and equipment here. You must detect a lot of emergencies. And they said, oh, we have lots of them all the time. And I said, thank you. I wanted to confirm that.
I keep saying this, and I can't emphasize it enough. They may be within the regulation. That does not protect your health. It really doesn't. So what? You're within, 220,000 tons that you're emitting into our community. You're going to get sick. And people generally, always, when looking at other places where there are compressor stations, and we've looked for 4 years now. We've looked at peer-reviewed studies, and that's when people get sick generally. It's during blowdowns. And it's also the constant year after year buildup and the toxic mix of all these different emissions. So regulations do not mean protection. So talk about your health. Talk about if you have something respiratory, you have children with asthma, please bring that up. That would be worsened by these emissions, no matter whether they're regulated or not.
Okay.
Who has a way of monitoring these blowdowns, what happens, it happens? They talk one time about putting up monitors through the community.
Right.
So you know what's coming out.
Yeah.
And you should know that on the first blowdown. Now, what will happen now if they find out that this, what we are expecting happens? What are they going to do?
Right. Which I think is a super important question to ask and an important thing to raise in the comment period. Yeah, because does anyone have an answer to that in terms of, if there's these monitors that detect an issue, what are they actually going to do to respond?
I have an answer. My answer is that I believe that Dominion has already calculated certain events, and they have weighed against any, can I say, reasonable fines, and that the fines are much less than what the cost is to make the correction.
Right.
And so they've already weighed all of that in. And the reason I take that position, because we have looked at, when I'm saying Dominion, I'm talking about the industry, how they have handled themselves throughout these past years. And the one thing that we have on our side is that we have a record. There is now a paper trail. If all of this stuff was known 50 or 60 years ago, we wouldn't even have these pipelines, you understand, or compressor stations. And so we do, so we have supporting evidence, but Dominion is going to the industry. Typically, they would pay the fine, okay? And they would take the heat because they're banking on the public having a short memory, and they're banking on, you know, the news of the day, that something is going to overtake that. That's what they do.
Kay, did you have a hand raised?
Nothing is my answer to that.
That's what they're really
They're gonna do nothing.
Right, they're really gonna do nothing. They might do some surface dressing.
They're gonna talk.
Right, but nothing.
Yeah, so Billy flagged another thing for us to make sure to talk about, and this came up in a number of the board of supervisors meetings and the planning commissioner meetings way back when, for folks that remember that, concerns around emergency response. If there is actually an emergency that arises, we need a better plan than the one that Dominion has been offering that's super vague and doesn't tell us much at all. Jiva?
My point, measured by Dominion.
Right.
So they're the ones that measure their own. It's the fox measuring how many chickens are lost in the hen house. So we are interested in, and Friends of Buckingham has done wondrous work in getting baseline testing in, but testing for air quality for these compressor stations is an important technical issue, and it's been, according to Cornell University, has been under-measured by some 40% for years. Maybe the expert can help us.
Many facilities have, and they'll have the capability in this facility to make the stack emissions data available in real time. And I think that's something that's not unreasonable to ask for, to be put into the permit. That there's a website and they put the data on in real time. So then you can see when there's an excursion of NOx or of what they measure, which is going to be NOx and SO2 maybe, and CO. So that's...
and other groups have talked about a lot is that it's to Dominion's advantage if there's not a record of how folks' health was before and then after the compressor station. So one of the things that folks have talked about asking for, demanding, and bringing up in comments is for a baseline health assessment. And so that's another thing to potentially add into your comments. Because we all know it's going to impact our health, but if they don't have that baseline, if we don't have that baseline, we have a lot more difficulty proving the negative impact.
And Friends of Buckingham is doing one.
Yes. Do you want to say anything to that, Chad?
Well, Heidi, can you say something?
Yeah, so Friends of Buckingham is doing what our government should be doing, what our health department should be doing, which is baseline testing of air and well water, surface water, and health. And we've gotten some grants to do that. It's a limited study, but we are joining many other communities all across the country that are, it's a Southwest Pennsylvania Environmental Health Project, that's working with other communities all around the country to do this. So we are working on it, and we're getting close to being finished with our baseline.
Thanks, Heidi. Last permit that they need to build.
Not the last, but one of the very important ones. Sharon, do you have more that, can you add to that?
The State Water Control Board, the 401 certification is not yet effective because they don't have soil and erosion plans approved yet. There are also some local permits, like I know here and in Nelson, they do not have their variances approved to cross floodplains. And in Nelson, the regulations are pretty strict. So they should be denied, so I don't know what happened then. And then they don't have this air permit. And I'm sure there are some others, you know, along the way in different counties. Some counties just allow their administrator to approve permits, and others require that there be public hearings and all of that kind of thing. So it's sketchy sometimes on what gets approved where. But I know that they did not allow in Augusta County one of their work areas, their contractor yards or whatever they want to call them. Their board of zoning appeals denied that. So they do have other things they need to get, and they keep saying it's a done deal. And I don't know who's going to talk about what happened today, but I'll be quiet and not say anything about that right now.
Well, yeah, we'll do that in updates.
Yeah.
For the compressor station.
Yeah.
And they have to get a separate permit for that, or is that?
So, but I'm not entirely sure. So the entire pipeline, and they usually have to get approval from the localities where they're going to be getting that water, gallons upon gallons, to do the hydrostatic testing. I'm not sure in terms of how that applies to the compressor station, but considering it's something that's used along the whole pipeline, I'm sure that'll also be important. Did you have a direct response?
Yeah,
okay.
They will have to hydrostatic test some wells and so forth, but that's usually small segments. We're talking hundreds of gallons, not thousands. And then the other thing I want to say is that in terms of addressing the comment about the fines are like $6,000 per violation per day. So they can build up really quickly if they ignore a problem for a long time. So there is real impetus in getting stuff fixed. So,
thank you.
So for instance, if they have the permit, that you will keep records that say such and such. If they don't keep the records, then that's a fine for every day they didn't keep records, which is how things really build up quickly. So it'll be important to look at the permit in terms of what record keeping is required, because that's where the big fines are.
Can you add that record keeping and fines to ideas?
Concerned with all of these things that we're talking about, how we can measure if there is harm done or anything else. Nothing of this can happen unless there's a a compressor station already built. How can you make records and comparisons of this is worse than it was last month or something like that? We don't want the compressor stations. So how can they give us any assurance of what all these records are?
Well,
Such great technology. Everything's so wonderful. You can't say, because some of these places all around us have blown up. We've had explosions over and over again. So what are they basing this on?
Station, and we know that we don't want it outright, and we're going to say that in these comments, but also we should be pulling apart the things that don't add up in the permit, and that's another thing that the Air Board will understand to make it less and less likely for them to approve that permit. So we need to really be coming at it from all points, but thank you so much for flagging that. So folks, we are running out of time, unfortunately, and just given that we've talked about a lot of details about how to comment, and then details about the draft permit, and details about the process and the pipeline in general, we just wanted to give you a couple minutes to check in with the buddies on your row. One, about how we really feel we can get